Hey everybody, this is Ernie Johnson with Inside the NBA. Man, did I have a good time hanging out with the guys from Pure Athlete.
Let's dig in a little bit with Ernie Johnson, the player.
We've got the lead. We're going to win the division today. I'm going to be all over the red and black.
Did you feel pressure as a kid being the son of such a well-known ball player?
Down deep, I knew I did not have the skills to play Major League Baseball.
Having played sports your whole life, you get cut. How did you deal with that?
Yeah, it hurt when it happened. I remember the day I got cut. I remember the coach.
Remember a moment where you said, wow, this thing's special?
It's going to be another season of me and Kenny and Shaq and Chuck doing whatever it is that we do.
Before we get to the podcast, if you have middle school or high school kids that play sports and you don't want to fundraise like me, we got you covered. My buddy Chris Carneal owns Booster. Chris?
We help schools and sports teams raise funds in a super fun and engaging way. In fact, the last 22 years, we've raised $750 million, and we can't wait to help you. Choose booster.com.
Welcome back to Pure Athlete. I am Jeff along with Brad, and I got to say, our birthday boy today, Britt.
That's right.
Happy birthday, buddy.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We're spending it in a good way today. I'm excited about today.
Mellow mushroom for lunch, though?
Little mellow for lunch.
And then what? You're taking the family out tonight, though,
we're
right?
all going out tonight.
They need to be taking you out tonight, not you taking them out
how that
tonight.
goes.
It's all coming out of the same account.
They're
though,
taking him out, but he's paying for it.
I'm just glad to have him.
Last time we talked, you took the kids out to Colorado for the Braves-Rocky series. Y'all have a good time?
I did. We had a great time. You guys held down the fort here. Had a great episode with Matt and Leslie Holiday, which I listened to this week when it came out. And you guys did a great job.
We don't know what it was. It just flowed so nice.
It did. It was maybe just because it was the two
yeah.
of us.
I mean, it was like Stockton and Malone,
Yeah,
without the third guy in there.
I gotta say, I heard the beginning of it, and y'all said, it was going to go great because I was gone. And Brad, you said, yeah, Dad's gone.
Yeah, so it was like Dad was out.
And look, I can take Jeff talking about my age. You're like my age. You're not like Jeff's age.
Look, it's like dog years. I mean, it gets farther and farther apart. We're what, 3-4 years apart? That's a lot of years.
Yeah,
well,
anything. Let's get to the show.
All
right. Well, I'm excited today, guys. Today's guest is, I think, one of the just best human beings I've ever been around, and probably one of the most nervous I have ever been was I was able to call a baseball playoff game with this man, my first one ever, and he'll be able to tell you on here how nervous and how sweating I was the whole time. But he's been the face of TNT since, well, I guess since I was born, pretty much. And I know y'all two have been around, but Ernie Johnson, thank you for coming on with us today.
Man, it is my pleasure. You guys look great, and if you're going to start talking about age, Britt, I don't know how many birthdays this is for you, but I am definitely the old man of the bunch. Because just celebrated my 68th the other day, so bear with the old man today in the course of this little conversation.
Hey man, we're so excited to have you. I got to say, we've had a lot of guests on here, and I don't usually fanboy anybody, but I'll give you a glimpse.
Don't start today.
I'll give you a glimpse into my age. One of my best memories. I'm a Braves fan since birth, and one of my earliest memory of the Braves is laying in bed at night with a transistor radio, listening to your dad and Milo Hamilton, and so that takes us way back. And been listening to Ernie Johnson Sr. and then Ernie Johnson Jr. since then, and have loved every minute of both.
Very kind, and I always enjoy it anytime anybody brings up those old days. And the difference with me. See, I could do that with the transistor radio, and my mom would never, come in and say, "Hey, turn that off and go to sleep." But everybody I talked to was like, "Oh, my parents used to tell me to turn off that transistor radio," and already there are people in the audience saying, "What the heck is a transistor?"
What is that?
Radio? Yeah, I remember transistor radios. I'm right there with you. It was
I do not. I have to say, I do not remember them. But I will tell you this before we get to it, Ernie. Like I said, I remember it was August of 2019. and I'd done a game or two for TBS, and I got a call, and they said, "Would you like to call one of the playoff series with Ernie Johnson?" And I remember thinking, "Oh man, like this is
Big leagues.
Big time.
this is the real deal." And Ernie was the best. For a week, I got to hung out with him. He helped me in so many different ways. But the coolest thing was when you talk about his dad, was before every game, right before first pitch, Ernie would put his dad's baseball card
awesome.
right next to the thing, and we'd have it sitting there, him broadcasting with us. And we got the great series, man. We had that 5-gamer out in Dodger Stadium where the Nats beat them and went on to win the World Series. So
Those were good times, man. Those are so much fun, Jeff, and it's all the stuff that goes into it too. It's not just the games themselves. It's just it's hanging out. It's having a glass of wine after the game. It's the travel with the crew. I mean, all those. It all goes into it. I don't know. I never remember exactly who won which game or who hit a dinger that won the game. Some of those things you remember, but it's all just being together, and making those trips.
Love it. Well, we've got so much to talk to you about today. As you know, we're here to talk about youth sports, but we want to talk about a few other things first. And I think maybe to start with, your TNT show is y'all are going to lose the NBA here a year from now. We're all kind of bummed about that in a big way. I know you hear that all the time, but we just want to ask you some questions about that show. And as you think about, the coming year, I'm just curious what parts of that are you going to savor? How are you going to savor it? And what are you going to miss most about all that?
Well, I think you savor all of it. I mean, it's kind of the reality. I don't know if it's really sunk in yet that this is our last year of the NBA on TNT, and that's tough because we've had such a long relationship with the league, and back before I even I've been at Turner for 35 years, and TBS had a relationship with the NBA before then, and then TNT was just getting started. So, it's going to be different, but it's also going to be the same. It's going to be another season of me and Kenny and Shaq and Chuck doing whatever it is that we do, which I've never really totally been able to wrap my head around. But it will be, I think for all of us, it's really going to be special. And really can't really look down the line too much beyond that as to what happens to the four of us, and who knows, maybe we stick together and do a different kind of a show. Who knows? I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there, and so it's way too early to even look into the future that way. But this is going to be a fun final season of doing the NBA on TNT, and I would rest assured that nothing will go unsaid because everybody realizes it's one more crack at it on that forum at least. So it's going to be great, and it's been just a blessing for me to work with those guys for as long as we have, because that just doesn't happen in TV very often, where I'm the old man at 35 years doing that show, but, Kenny and Chuck, 20 plus years, Shaq for the last 13 or so. And somehow we haven't had a TV executive step in and say, what would really work is this guy with this guy and this guy and get rid of this guy. They haven't done that. And so that kind of longevity I appreciate. And we will we'll give you another season, man. We'll nobody's FedExing this thing in, I'll tell you that.
I was going to say what I can't wait is, it teeters sometimes with Shaq and especially Chuck, and now you're giving Chuck almost just kind of a free gun to just go off. I mean, it's going to be very interesting.
Hey, he's always had that, Frenchie.
That's a good point.
That is not going to change, and no, it's It's going to be the same show.
Hey, Ernie, I know the show evolved, over time, especially the beginning, but was there ever a moment, where you said, wow, this thing's special. This thing's got potential to be really, really special?
I just think it started feeling a little different when Chuck got there. Because Kenny and I had worked together for a couple of seasons, and we had a really good thing going. And I knew from day one when Kenny, late in his career, had a couple of 10-day contracts and would come in and hang out and do a couple of shows. And I remember Tim Kiley, our producer, and I looked at each other and said, man, when this guy's playing or days are done, he's going to be outstanding. He gets it. And so we had a great time. And then when Chuck came in, he changed the entire landscape of shows like that, because it was no longer strictly a basketball show. And he would, if the game was no good, he said the game was no good. And this is terrible, and then it was, if he felt like something was happening in the world that he wanted to talk about, man, he's going to talk about it. And that really freed everybody up just to kind of, take it as it comes and let it fly. And I think that's kind of what's resonated with the fans out there too, because I think they watch and really aren't sure exactly what's going to happen next. And you can join the club, because I don't either. One of the scariest parts of the job early on when Chuck joined us was when he would, we're live and he said, I got to get something off my chest. And I was like, and I hope everybody knows who's saying this and that it's not, the guilt by association. But that's what's made it so much fun, because he was always the most quotable guy in the league when he played. And that didn't change a bit. And that's the thing. A lot of former athletes, when they get into this, are a little reticent and, don't want to step on any toes or don't want to say something that, an old teammate might hear this or that kind of thing. But he's just been the same person now that he was then. Frenchie's the same way. Jeff Rancour on TV is just like Jeff in the clubhouse, and that's the most important thing. My dad always taught me, he said, be yourself. And if you are yourself, then you never get on there feeling like, okay, I got to be TV guy today, or I've got to, no, you're just who you are. And that I think just resonates with the viewer.
You could have, before we get into the youth sports here, you could ask, I'm sure you have 1,000 stories. What is your favorite Chuck story from on set?
Oh my goodness. I think, see, the great thing about Chuck is that he's never been afraid to laugh at himself. On that show, we give it to each other. We all take it. It's no place to be if you have a thin skin. But way, way back in the day, we just had an idea one night, and this is when Magic was working with us for a time. So it's me and Magic and Kenny and Chuck doing the show. And somebody in the production meeting had the idea, what we should do is that at halftime tonight, and this is something we did not rehearse, it's just something we kind of came up with and said, well, let's see if it works when we do it on the air, which is the best way to do it. Because nobody wants a show that's, well, they must have rehearsed that 700 times and then it doesn't come off as natural. But somebody had the idea, we should turn the studio into the Champions Club. So you have to have a championship ring to get in. And and Kenny will be in on it. Magic will be in on it. Chuck will be the only one who's not. Well, how are we going to get this done? How are we going to do a live halftime show and have Chuck, in the dark on this thing? So we said, well, Kenny will lead Charles to the studio a different way than they normally go. They'll just say that, hey, we've got to record something at some point, and they need us on our phones when we're walking in. And so that area outside Studio J had a red carpet and had the velvet ropes and had 2 real security guards stationed outside the studio. And so halftime starts, and I'm standing there with Magic, and I'm saying, hey, the studio's been transformed into the Champions Club. You got to have a ring to get in. I'm with Magic. Magic looks at the security guard, says, this guy's with me. he gets in. And so we walk into the studio. Meantime, Kenny and Charles come walking down the hallway, and they're on their phones, like they're on their phones. Charles has no idea what's going on. They get to the velvet ropes. Security stops Chuck. And Kenny says, Kenny Smith, Houston Rockets, 94, 95. And Chuck looks up, and here's a sign outside. It says Champions Club. And he just says, so y'all are playing a trick on the Chucks. And he laughed as much as anybody in the building did. And the thing that happens, what the crew's so good at doing, they got all the lights dimmed in the studio. They've got strobe lights going on. They got this techno beat pumping through the thing. And we had made a list of guys that Charles would resent having championship rings. So we just we're standing in this darkened studio. We've got this list. And every now and then, as Chuck stood outside, we would open the door and smoke would come out and the music's pounding on. And we would just take a name off the list. And I'd say, Charles, Mike Penberthy's asking about you in here. and then here comes Kenny saying, hey, Jean Tabak wants to have a word with you. Chuck, please come in. And then Magic said, and Jack Haley's in here and says, you can't come in. It was one of the greatest halftimes we had because it was just, here's an idea. Now let's see if we can pull it off live. And it was just perfect.
Oh
man, that's the best. And we've all watched it.
Oh yeah.
And if you're in our audience and you haven't watched that, you got to go find
Yeah.
it because it is an absolute scream.
Also, the documentary, I guess it was on TNT, the behind the scenes of the show was fantastic.
The inside story, our crew did such a great job on that, and I think it's still on Max. I mean, if you get on Max, you can watch the four parts. But man, did they dig up some stuff from the past for that? And it was. I mean, there was so much stuff has happened on that show. I didn't even remember some of it, and then all of a sudden I'd look at something and say, "Man, that was awesome." So no, it's been a wonderful ride, and again, this next season will be. It'll be off the charts.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to ask you as we transition to youth sports, I want to ask you one more thing about the show. You just talked about the crew, and I think this really translates into youth sports. You know, you four are the guys out front. You know, everybody sees you guys, but you got a huge crew. You got a huge team of people who are putting this on. And I just kind of want to know from y'all's perspective, I think I've heard you talk about the secret sauce of the show is the whole team. Can you just kind of speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, to the average viewer, I mean, it looks like, okay, here, these four guys are here, and I guess there are a few other people involved, but they're the guys that we're seeing. But you never think about the at least 50 other people who have jobs in the studio that night, from graphics to lighting to to running the cameras to the social team, everybody. And so, I mean, it is a total group effort. And if somebody doesn't do their job the right way, it reflects on everybody. And that's why I think everybody feels, the responsibility to do your job that night. You have to show up and be ready. And be ready with ideas too, because that's one of the great things about our producers over the years, whether that's, Tim Kiley or Jeremy Levin or Keith Robinson, any of those guys, is that they have never gotten carried away with a title like, okay, I'm the producer, so I'm going to set what goes on. In those production meetings, everybody's weighing in, and they say, what are we going to do for the Neato stat of the night tonight? Well, it's National such and such day. We could do this and we could do this. Hey, we could shoot this and we can go out and buy this and here's a prop. And it's like everybody pitches in. And so I think that's why when the show wins an Emmy, and the show has won a bunch of them, everybody in the place walks around saying, I was part of that. It wasn't just those four guys that you see. It's everybody involved in the show. And when you have that kind of a team pulling on the rope together, it makes everybody want to get to work. And I think that's something that I think sometimes goes unappreciated by just the average viewer. But if you spent a night in that studio and saw the jobs everybody does and the pride everybody takes in it, it's pretty overwhelming.
You know, it's so funny. That's such a good question, Britt, because we talk all the time on here, Ernie, about being a great teammate and doing your part, whether you're the superstar, whether you're the last person on the bench. And we've had a lot of athletes say that on here, that it takes a whole team. So let's dig in a little bit with Ernie Johnson, the player, the ball player coming up.
This won't take long, will it?
No. So, but give us some dialogue. I know you played 1 year at Georgia, but what did your life look like growing up playing sports?
Well, you know, when your dad plays big league ball, you're going to kind of gravitate toward that. And I was the youngest of the three kids. So when my dad's pitching in the World Series in '57, I'm a year old. So my recollections of that win over the Yankees is a little foggy. But you could look at old home movies, and every one of them had me in the front yard with a bat and a ball. You know, my dad's pitching to me, I'm hitting, I'm running, I'm sliding, and so that's what I wanted to do. And I loved playing the game. And so, I went to Marist High School. I played there. And that was before Marist started winning state championships every year.
You built the foundation.
Yeah, part of the reason was that I was on that team. That's why we were winning state championships. So then, it's like, man, I would love to play college baseball. And back then, you're talking about 1974. I'm looking, I'm saying, and keep in mind, Frenchie, this is something, you say you don't know transistor radios. You also don't know a life of having a mailbox with no offers in it. Okay. Because that was mine. Nobody was saying, hey, come play ball with us. But I went to South Carolina. Bobby Richardson was there. Looked at South Carolina, looked at Georgia Southern, and looked at Georgia. And again, nobody's offering me anything. I'm just saying, if I were trying to walk on, am I going to get on at South Carolina? No. Am I going to get on at Georgia Southern? Probably not. And so I was like, I'm going to try to walk on at Georgia. And, I go to fall practice, and then suddenly I'm still hanging around, and then they make the cuts, and there was like, I had a really good glove. I couldn't hit a lick, but I was a backup first baseman as a freshman. So, and as I tell people, I walked on as a freshman and was told to walk off as a sophomore, but I did have that. I did have that 1 year of, wearing the red and black, and it was an incredible experience. Because when you're a freshman, you're trying to figure out where your classes are, what bus to catch, what am I going to do with this roommate? It's like, and at the same time, suddenly your afternoons are spent with these guys. A lot of them are grown men by this point, and juniors and seniors in their 20s, and it's like they've been around and you don't know anything, but they were awesome, and it was just a wonderful experience, even for a guy who didn't get to play very much, just to be in that environment, to be on a team. And I was playing for Jim Watley, who was in his last year after coaching for about 400 years at Georgia. So it was his last season. And I think I was 2 for 18. I think that's what I went, 2 for 18. And my one career RBI came at Tennessee.
Nice.
And it was 4:26 in the afternoon. Temperature was about 78 degrees. There was a fastball. There was a fastball away that I took to left center field.
The exit velo was probably amazing too, I'm sure, right?
110 off the bat.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was unbelievable. Yeah, I was really way ahead of the curve in like launch angle and stuff. The funny, excuse me, the funny thing about that day though is we're playing Tennessee, and they had a guy named Condridge Holloway back then who was also the Tennessee quarterback and had a 56 game hitting streak. The guy was an amazing player. And Rick Honeycutt was a pitcher on that team, on that Tennessee team. And so if we sweep this doubleheader, we win the division. And then we still had an Auburn series at home coming up, so we had another chance to clinch if we didn't. So we win game one, a game in which the coach pulled us off the field because the frat boys were throwing oranges at us. They were peppering the field. Oh, these frat houses were all around the field at Tennessee, and they're throwing stuff. He pulls us off the field, then we finally go back on. And so in game two, I get in the game, and I'm the most surprised guy in the world. I thought Big Jim had made a mistake. He was like, "You're at first," and I was like, "What, me?" So I get in there, and game is tied. We're playing a doubleheader, and it's seventh inning. Seventh inning rolls around, tie game. I'm at the dish. I slap this RBI single to left center, and I'm standing on first base, and I'm saying, "We've got the lead. We're going to win the division today. I'm going to be all over the red and black. My picture might be in the student newspaper." Yeah, and so I'm sitting here. We go back in the field. All we got to do is shut them down in the bottom of the seventh, and we win. And then there was like a leadoff walk, and then a single, and then a double play ball right to the shortstop, right through his legs. And the bases are loaded, and the next guy hits a granny, and we lose the game. Oh. And
there goes your moment.
There was my moment. Yeah, but we would come home and beat Auburn, and then lost in the SEC tournament to LSU. But those are great days, man. And again, it's not just the games themselves; it's the road trips with the guys. It's you just learn a lot if you sit there and shut up a little bit and use your ears more than your mouth. You learn some things, and it was wonderful. And I still keep in touch with those guys. Emails go out, and you get 15 guys, who all for one season in 1975 were all on that team. It's special.
Ernie, going back a little bit before then, I mean, I know you had an amazing relationship with your father, but did you feel pressure as a kid being the son of such a well-known ball player and broadcaster? Did you feel it when you played Little League? Did you feel it when you played at Marist? And did people, like, they knew who you were and then your dad was? Did you feel extra pressure? I know it probably went from him, but just, internally, did you feel that?
Oh, sure. I mean, and not at first, but then you just hear some things, and then like you get to all-star teams are picked. And look, I was a good player. So it was like, I should have been on those teams but there was always, he's only on the all-stars because his dad's the Braves announcer, blah, blah, and you just let that stuff roll off of you. But I'd hear it all the time. I'd hear it. People would find it amusing. I mean, we were playing senior league one time, and you mentioned Milo Hamilton earlier, Britt, and so Milo's son Mark was playing in the same league as I was, and so he was pitching for his team, and I was at the plate, and the umpire actually called time at one point. Says, "Hold on, that's Milo's kid pitching, and you're Ernie's kid batting." Well, I'll be. Play. It's like it was that kind of thing. So, but it was some of that stuff came, and I heard it too at Georgia. Shoot, I heard guys. He walked on. Yeah, his dad is. But you just what it makes you do is prove to folks that you belong.
Yeah.
Okay, And it was the same way when I got my first TV job in Macon. I'm in Macon, Georgia, anchoring the news. Oh, yeah, well, that's Ernie's Kid. That's why. And that's what keeps you grinding, is that you're going to prove to people that, no, look, did he open some doors for me? And was in his name recognition something? Yeah, it is. But you've got to be able to do it. Nobody's going to keep you employed because of who your dad is if you're terrible on the air. So it was, it's a good question, but it's something that you would hear. Sometimes they didn't think you heard it, but you'd overhear it, and again, you just let it roll off your back.
So Ernie, you mentioned, so you played that freshman year, and then the next year you went out and you got cut. I've read some of that in your book, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But having played sports your whole life, you get cut. Tell us, almost every kid out there, except for about 1% of them, end up not playing and ever making any money playing ball. So tell us, how did you deal with that? How did you move on past that and transition into the rest of life?
It's interesting because, it hurt when it happened. I remember the day I got cut. I remember the coach, and I'm not going to get into who it was. It was the guy who replaced Jim Watley, and it was, and I have no ill will toward the man, but he gave me the, we just don't have enough uniforms for the quality individuals we have in this program. It's like, okay, whatever. I said I kind of saw the handwriting on the wall when in fall practice, we're 3 deep at every position, taken infield, and I'm not one of the 3 deep at first. Come on. And so I never really felt I got a real great shot at it. And I think some decisions had already been made as this coach came in from a junior college and brought a bunch of his guys with him. Okay. So this was going to happen. And I was okay, and I think right down deep, I knew I did not have the skills to play Major League Baseball, which was my dream for so long. I just, if you threw anything over 85, I was toast. Okay. And then if you put a wrinkle on it, just forget it. Okay. So I think my dad took it a little harder than I did, actually. He just thought, that maybe I hadn't gotten the look that I deserved. But I said, it's fine, Dad, we're good. And I said, this is going to happen where at some point you're going to have to say, now what am I going to do? And so I'm at Georgia, I'm an English major, and I thought to myself, I could be an English teacher and a baseball coach. That's what I could do. I said, one of my favorite teachers when I was in high school was the baseball coach. And I said, well, he's loving life, man. He looks like he loves going to work every day. He's coaching baseball and he's teaching. And so I thought that's what I was going to do. And then it's, like my dad never sat down and said, hey, I guess now since that baseball dream has died, you're going to be an announcer. No, there was never that. It was always kind of what pumps you up? What gets your heart, pumping a little more when you think about doing that. And just really on a whim, I was like, you know what? I will try the campus radio station at Georgia just to see if I like it. And I liked it. And it was like, they'll pay you to go to games. You'll get in free, and you're in sports. And let's see where this takes you. And despite the fact that my initial offerings on the radio were absolutely brutal, I stuck at it. I mean, there was some really bad stuff being broadcast by yours truly back in the day, but it was that was what was firing me up, and that's where I decided to land and just see where it would take me, from the radio to TV in Macon and Spartanburg and Atlanta, and then eventually to Turner. And but yeah, there's that day. And for some kids, it comes earlier. For some, it's later, where it's just like, okay, that's not going to happen. Now, what's plan B?
So, Ernie, before we get to your book real quick, you played youth sports, you coached your kids, and I've seen you up at the park with your grandkids now. Looking at it from a perspective maybe up high, what are some of the issues you think are in youth sports today?
Geez, where do I start? I think number one is just the feeling by a lot of parents that, look, I've heard all the numbers, I know the percentages of kids who go on to play college, high school ball, college ball, pro ball. But my kid's different. It's like there's just this unwillingness to believe that there will be anything but a professional career that comes out of this. And I think that's one. I think two is just, and parents who get in the way, get in the way of the coach. Parents who put too much pressure on the kids, like every game is the end of the world. I would just like to see more, just supporting your kids and letting them play and letting them enjoy themselves and let the coach coach. How much can a 7 or 8 year old or 9-year-old kid focus on what he or she is trying to do out there when he or she has a million voices going on? Whether, the coach wants one thing, but then dad's saying, no, play closer to the line. No, come in. No, and it's like, you can be a parent and be supportive and enjoy the game without trying to, inject yourself into the game. And so I just, when I sit back as a grandpa and watch this, it's like, I look at my daughter and say, who is this guy who's been yelling the whole game? What's his deal? That's his dad. That's her dad. That's just the way he is. And it's like, I saw in a 6-year-old, a 6U softball game one day where the kid at the plate wasn't sure where to stand or any of this and how to, and the coach is out there saying, here, take a practice swing, boom, okay. And then a woman who had to be my age was standing up on the other side and saying, that's an automatic strike. You can't do that. You cannot instruct. You can't do. And I was like, stop. Maggie, what are we doing here? What is going on with this? And so those kind of things. And I know I'm sounding like the guy who's like the old man, but it's, I think the parental pressure gets to be a little overwhelming, and there's very little just, hey, enjoy the game and have fun, kids. That's it. And back when I was when Cheryl and I, after we got married, this is back in the late 80s, when our first, Eric is playing baseball for the first time, and he's like 6 or 7, and a coach called the house one night. And so again, I make these, I'm talking about something now I see as a grandpa, but it goes back, and the coach says, hey, we've got practice 3 times this week before the season opens. And I'm like, hey, and I was hoping that maybe he would see that I was, kind of joking with him. I say, Coach, you think practice 3 times a week for a kindergartner is enough? And he said, I don't know. He said, but I've seen some of those other teams out there, and if we do not get out there and practice, we're going to get killed. And I was like, Coach, I said, here's the deal. son is 6, 7 years old. I said, here's the thing. If you kill his desire to play, then you and I are going to have an issue. I said, but I think 3 times is more than enough for a kindergartner to be out practicing, and it's so the stuff like this has been going on for a long time. And it's, it's, I don't know if it's worse now. It probably is. I mean, because that was even long before travel ball or any of that other stuff. That was just rec league stuff. And it was, and I shake my head a lot when I see that kind of thing. And I just think that the fun of the game sometimes is lost because of coaches who are overbearing or out of touch, and parents who are the same way.
Yeah, I think it's worse because I think parents are, our lives are so dominated today by youth sports. And so much of life is wrapped up in our kids playing youth sports. And so we're so emotionally engaged. And Ernie, you're talking about your perspective as a grandparent. And I think, if parents would step back, and I'm talking to myself, my kids are done now, but as I look back at myself 5 years ago, if you can watch a grandparent and the way that they watch their grandkids play ball, that's the way we need to be as parents. We need to enjoy it. We need to promote the fun. We need to help them however we can help them. But we had Smoltz on, and he challenged parents to just go to a game and don't say a word the whole game and just listen to all the other parents.
No, and I agree. I think what you said, Ernie, is so right on. Everybody thinks their kid's going to be this Bryce Harper, this, LeBron James, Steph Curry, and it's just, and you know what? Don't kill the kid's dream. Absolutely. That's what people tell me all the time. Well, you're killing their dream. No, you're not. But also, like you said, have a backup plan. What are you going to do when you're not Steph Curry?
You're one of those guys who was the best player out there all the time. There was just, you have a gift, okay? Not everybody has that gift. Not even if, mom and dad say, I think he has the gift, or I hope he has it, but you had it. And so part of you having that gift is always wanting to be better and wanting a coach to challenge you and help you improve. And that doesn't work for every kid. And I think it behooves coaches out there too, just to know your players, know which players you need to push and which you can push. And look, you can't treat them all the same way. I know that's what people say, well, you got to treat every player. No, some of them need a little more of this. Some of them need an arm around the shoulder, more than this kid does. And some need to be pushed and challenged, and they kind of thrive off that. But I think as a coach, you need to know that. You need to know your players well enough to say, he's in left field, but would really rather be doing something else. So I'm not going to ride him as much as I see the potential in this kid playing first or playing short, And so I think you really have to be cognizant of that. And while you may say, I'm going to treat all my players the same, you have to be aware of who the emotional kids are, who the kids are who are really into it, who the kids who are on the fence about it. And I think that is, it's just so important. It's not an easy job. And I'm not saying, okay, you're the coach, so that's easy. No, it requires a lot of work. And it requires probably more than you think it does. You're not just there to hit infield and teach your kids how to run the bases. When you're the coach, that's a responsibility. And you're taking these kids under your wing. And coaching is more than just, wins and losses and who do we play next. It's like, how are we going to grow? How are we growing these kids up?
Ernie, there comes a time that all of us got a bunch of kids, but there comes a time, where as a parent, your kid comes to you and says, "Hey, I'm done. I'm done. I've given my best run at this." And you talk about, I think in your book, you talk about your son Eric came to you. was it his junior year or after his junior year, and just said, "Hey, I think I'm finished playing baseball." Can you talk to parents out there just about that story and kind of how you handled that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, and you wonder, are you supposed to say, no, look, you got talent, you do this, or are you going to let them cut their own path? And it's not like that was said, like Eric told me, and I said, okay, fine. I mean, there was some pushback. I want to make sure that this is really where you're coming from, or is there another reason that you don't want to do it? Because I thought he had, as all dads do, that he had some talent, left-handed pitcher, and it was like, you'd like to see how far he can take this. But I think part of what it was just like, he was working so hard to try to get there, and then like wasn't getting to play as much, or he was in a different thing. And it was like, this isn't fun anymore, Dad. I was like, okay, all right. Well, and sometimes you just have to let, especially at that age, when you're 16 years old or something, it was like, okay. That wasn't me when I was your age. I was still saying I want to play college ball or maybe Major League Baseball, and then somebody made the decision for me. But for him, it's just not what it used to be. And I'm not going to force a kid to love the game, and I'm not going to say no. You stay, you stay and you do this, because while there's value in some things and saying to really stick this out. Playing baseball in high school didn't register with me on, this is going to be one of these decisions that's going to be life altering. Like if you come to me and said, I'm dropping out of high school, learning's not for me. That would not be, I would not have accepted that. But when he said, you know what, baseball's not fun for me anymore, I said, all right. So there you go. It may disappoint you at that point, but I have to give him some. It wasn't easy for him to tell me. I'm sure, and I'll give him credit for doing that.
Yeah, I think it also, as parents, it gives us such an opportunity to practice what we preach about. Look, I don't love you because you play baseball or because you play a sport, because it's hard for a kid to come and they think they're going to disappoint you. So I've had the same thing with one of my kids, and it is a little disappointing that the journey's over, but you're not disappointed in them. And so there's a big difference.
Well, without question. No, Britt, it's so well put. It's like, yeah, you might have when you see him playing, thinking, hey, this, he can take this somewhere, and then, but if their heart's not in it, you're not going to be able to put their heart in it. It's just not going to, because at that point too, I mean, that's a lot of work. That's, coaches have you, before school, after school. I mean, it's almost like a full-time job. And if you're not into it, then I'm going to pick something that's more life-altering in my estimation that he's making decisions on before we say, no, look, we're going to get into this. We're going to talk about this. This is not a good decision for you. But something like that, it was, it was like not easy to hear, but I understood it, and I was fine with it.
So Ernie, I want to shift gears slightly here. Our show is about youth sports, but our brand is Pure Athlete. It's about helping kids and parents be their best versions on the field, but also off the field. And one of the reasons we were really excited about having you is because you're a major sports figure, but you talk about life and what really matters in life. And so we want to talk a little bit and hear from you. You got a book called Unscripted, which I would highly recommend to anybody.
I don't read a lot, but I actually read that book, so you should be proud, Ernie.
It's an easy read and it's so good.
Yeah.
You're Frenchie?
It was an audiobook though, wasn't it?
No, I can't audio. My mind doesn't work like that. I have to read it and see it.
Ernie, can you tell us a little bit about the name Unscripted and kind of what that is derived from, and just walk us into Blackberry Moments and a little bit of that?
Yeah, I mean, it was the title really came because it was kind of a takeoff or kind of a descriptor of the show that most folks know me from inside the NBA, which is an unscripted, letter rip show, but also described really the way Cheryl and I have kind of lived our lives. And so, I think we all, at times, we can look at the script the way we see it and say, when Cheryl and I were married in 82, and, we had Eric and we had Maggie, and so the kind of the script there was like, wow, you got a, great wife, great job too, a boy and a girl. Don't mess with the script. This is what a lot of folks want. But I really think when we began adopting kids, we had 6 kids, 4 adopted. The script went out the window, and sometimes you have to go that way, not just follow your own script or the way you would write it. And so, there are moments and things that are going to happen in your life that you never would have scripted, but those unscripted moments we learn to embrace and not fear. And so that's kind of the genesis of the unscripted part of the title. But you mentioned the Blackberry Moments, and that came from a little league game when I was a kid. When kid on the other side hit a ground rule double, and then we couldn't start the game again because our left fielder and center fielder had gone to get the ball, and we all go out and look for the outfielders, and we can see the ball over the fence, and then like 15 feet away are the left fielder and the center fielder eating blackberries in the middle of a game. And it was like, that became to me, it was like this modern day parable, as I thought about it as I got older, about, sometimes you need to step away from the game and enjoy the Blackberry moments. You can't get so caught up with, whatever that game is, whether it's the next conference call or whether it's scrolling through social media or whatever it is, whatever is occupying all your time. Because if you're not able to look to your left and your right and see the blackberries and see the moments that can make somebody's life special, then you're missing out. And so that's how, the Blackberry Moments came about. That's how Unscripted Moments came about. And really, when you're talking about coaching and you're talking about kids in sports, Michael, who we adopted from Romania, had muscular dystrophy, but a high school basketball coach at Mill Creek High School outside Atlanta wanted him on his basketball team. Here's a kid in a wheelchair, and here's Phil Beaulieu, this coach from, who he's coaching hoop up in Indiana, which is basketball heaven. And he comes down to football country here in Braselton, Georgia, and takes this head coaching job. And one of the first things he does that first year is ask me, we'd never met. He says, hey, can I have your kid on my basketball team? And I'm like, he's in a wheelchair. That's not a prop. He's not going to give you 30 a night. He says, no. He said, I love his heart. He said, I love the fact that I see him driving his chair, and I know it takes all the strength he has. And he said, and when the day I met him and I walked away, he said, love you too, coach. And he said, and I hadn't said that to him. He said, but he says, I want him to teach my able-bodied players, the guys who are putting the uniform on, maximum effort and having a heart for others. He said, and I think your boy can do that for this team. And I'm like, well, I had not heard that perspective from a coach before. And Cheryl Ann and I were like, you do whatever you want to do with him. He'll love being on that team, and you have to have met Michael to appreciate what he had a whole lot of developmental delays, didn't speak well, but had this Rain Man kind of memory with stuff like cars and vacuum cleaners and lawnmowers. That's all he wanted to know from you when he met you. And he would never forget it. So you could meet Michael one day, and then 7 years later, you'd see him, and he'd tell you, Honda Civic, leather interior, silver outside. And the person would go, whoa, yeah, that is me. But that was his deal. And when I talk about stepping away from the game and these Blackberry moments, see, Phil Beaulieu did that as a coach. Phil, was a teacher at the same time as coaching. But he would take 5 minutes out of his class period sometimes and teach his classes and say, hey, I'm going to take 5 minutes to tell you about this kid I know named Michael Johnson. Born in Romania, muscular dystrophy, in a wheelchair. And he'd tell Michael's story. And he said, and I know a bunch of you guys walk around the halls here at Mill Creek using sign language. And most of it's with one finger. And the kids all kind of went, yeah, that happens a lot. He said, well, let's try this. Let's try this. He said, I'm going to teach you something in sign language. It's I love you. That's how you say I love you in sign language. He said, and if you tip your index finger at the other person, it means love you too. So that's one of Michael Johnson's favorite things to say. And what happens, because Phil stepped away from the game, which was teaching history that day or whatever, and decided to share this, when they do senior night 3 years later, and all the kids are going out and they're getting a blanket with the Mill Creek logo on it, embroidered in their name and all this. And the last kid they call up is Michael, who drives up in his wheelchair, and, fans are clapping like this. And I look up in the student section and they're standing like this. And so that's what it means to be a coach who steps away from the game and enjoys these Blackberry moments. And it's like his philosophy on coaching was always, my job here is to love you guys. The job here is to grow you guys up. And, it'd be great to say this is like a movie of the week. Mill Creek went 32-0 and won the state championship. No, these guys were getting thumped. Okay. They were playing Norcross that had 4 future NBA players on it. It's like, but man, the lessons they learned, and that group of young men at that time kind of took Michael under their wing. And, 10 years later, and they graduated, and then the center on the team calls me one day and says, hey, Mr. Johnson, I'm getting married. And I said, oh, Spencer, that's awesome. He said, could Michael be at my wedding? And that's when, see, the coaching world needs more Phil Beaulieu's. And to be able to live through that and watch that, have a front row seat to see how he did his job that way, he was always the guy I'm going to compare folks to. Is he a Phil Beaulieu kind of coach? And so that's what you need. I think that some things are bigger than the game. In fact, a lot of things are bigger than the game.
Well, Ernie, you, as a fellow adoptive parent, I've got 6 kids, 2 are internationally adopted, 1 special needs. And thanks for being such an amazing role model. And you've made a lot of folks are scared of adoption. Like you said, they're scared of kind of messing up the perfect situation, which there is no perfect situation. Yeah. And so I just want to thank you because I mean, you and your wife have been amazing role models, and I think you've encouraged so many families to have faith and to go out there and adopt and take on challenges that they really didn't think they could take on their own. And so it just means the world to me, and means the world to a lot of people. And my my daughter has got spina bifida, and she's cheerleading tonight in the football game. And so we got a coach that's the same way and loves her the way she is, and just very thankful for her being that type of coach as well.
No, I love hearing that, and I just think it just demonstrates to the players on that team too that, look, not everybody is dealt the same hand. Not everybody can jump through the gym, through the roof. Not everybody can drain threes effortlessly. But there's value. There's value in everybody. I know you're going to be lazy and just think, oh, no, I'm not even going to see what the value is. Or are you going to be like a Phil Beaulieu and say, there's value in there? And I think that's what you got to find. And I think, look, on any team, it's up to the coach to find the value in all of his players. He may not be able to do this, but he can do this, or she can do this, but she's not as good as her at this, but she can do this. And I think you find the value, and then that's what you focus on. And I think for some, it's, in Michael's case, it was, he's brought the intangibles to that team. I mean, I would go into that locker room at halftime sometimes, take his wheelchair in there and listen to the coach talk, or sometimes I would just let Michael go in there and he'd come back outside. And I said, hey, they're down by 20. So Michael, what was coach like in there? Broke a clipboard. And I was like, okay, thank you for the update. But at the same time, it was, he would love to sit in the locker room and just ask these kids what they drove. So he knew what everybody drove. He knew who took the bus because they're just freshmen, but it was, this kid Spencer, whose wedding he went to, fouled out of a game against North Gwinnett one night and came back to the bench and threw his towel down and plopped himself in his chair. And Michael looked at him and said, Spencer. And Spencer said, yes, Michael. He said, Spencer driving a Suzu rodeo? And this kid who had just been pounding it inside with this big guy from North Gwinnett all night long, I saw his shoulders kind of slump, and he just laughed, and he was like, yeah, Michael, Suzu rodeo. And it's, I'll never forget that stuff, man. It's, sports is this unbelievable canvas where so many wonderful things can happen. And especially to me, if it's not all about who's making the pros and what's your record. It's this rich landscape for wonderful things to happen.
Well, you know what, Ernie? I usually finish a show by asking one question, and I think I'm going to go unscripted because what we talk about on here is a pure athlete, and the story you just told with Michael that I got choked up, obviously, what Brad does. I think this is a perfect place to finish in the fact that you are everything that's great with sports, what you preach, everything that's great about life, and the way that you and Cheryl Ann go about living and doing it every day and honoring Michael's legacy. And, we can't thank you enough for coming on here, man. I mean, everything you just talked about with Michael and Coach Beaulieu is what we want for our kids and in this game. So, man, it's a perfect way to end it, man. I can't thank you enough.
And it has been my pleasure to be with you, Frenchie and Brad and Britt. It's, I love spending time talking about the stuff that matters. And we can do a million podcasts about who's going to win the Southwest Division this year in the NBA, and it gets a little old. And to just talk about these kind of things and to be able to share that is awesome. I've enjoyed every second of it. So thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Ernie.
It's been man, it's been a privilege.
Absolutely, man.
You got it, guys.
I can't do it.
See ya.
I don't know.
See you, buddy.